So the technique I used here is one that will look familiar, I think, from those that know Bob's work, that you have things in this world, animals that behave. You find a representation, an empirical one, pigeons in the lab as a model for animals in general in the wild. You generate a hypothesis about things, and that hypothesis is, in my case, that they're averaging different rates of reinforcement. You then make some predictions about what's going on. In this case, I found a harmonic mean would work for one set of conditions. You predicted whether it's going to work for others. It does, then you tighten up the experiment some more. So you go round and round between things and representations of things. C.S. Peirce called that cycle retroduction. The cycle is the one in which the mill grinds out, as I would have it, it grinds out truth. The top-down accuracy, proportion of variance accounted for as truth. Bottom-up accuracy, proportion of variance in the model is constrained by the data, elegance. Can't go into that too much for you, but there's a deep relationship here as we negotiate back and forth. Bob talked about a version of this as full cycle social psychological research. It is what science is about. It goes way back to Plato's metaphor of the cave. In this metaphor, prisoners were chained up, looking at shadows cast on the front wall, as puppeteers brought figures in front of the fire and cast shadows on the wall. Plato was so smart, he could see 2,500 years into the future, because immediately faculty are going to recognize this representation as one in which the prisoners are the dissertation committee, and the puppeteers with the puppets are our graduate students, and they're holding up their data on a PowerPoint slide, projecting it up on the front wall. And the faculty who can't look around, can't look actually at the data that are being collected, instead are looking at statistics on data sets collected from representative samples from animals that represent things in the wild. And they're trying at this great remove to make sense of what's in our hand, you know? And they can't turn around and look. This is that part of the process of science. We've got descriptions, hypotheses, and models. What it lacks, of course, is the experimental method. These guys are chained. They can't get up there and turn the puppet around or see it in full life. And so it was a limited description of what we as scientists do who manipulate the world. Now, one of my mentors at Harvard, Smitty Stevens, invented the term schema-puric, which never caught on, but I really like it. Schema-puric for him meant that we have these schema, models, maps, languages, mathematics, graphs, and empirics, of course, data, facts, stimuli. And it's the job of scientists to go between these. We're not empiricists in that we just don't look at data. We're not theoreticians that will just generate models. We go back and forth from one to the other. And you can do that here. You decide what data you're going to represent, what representational structure you're going to use. You delimit it. You can use material implication in A than B in all of these cases. So this is what scientists do. They go between one level and the other. Much of what I've learned about modeling, most of what I've learned, probably all that I've learned that's true about modeling, comes from my dear colleague Dave Hestenes, to which I owe much and for his intellectual inspiration and guidance in my career. This is embodied in a larger stack of pancakes, going from sense data to facts. Facts is decided by finders of fact. Yes, this dissertation is passing, that dive is a 10, that death is willful murder. Or with the aid of tools like statistics, yes, this group is different from that group, or no, it's not different. To models, and scientists mostly go between models and facts, up to theories, which give rules for construction of models, how you use them, it restricts what we can do, to frameworks, which are a bias for what kinds of models, contextualism, mechanism, religious worldviews, Katzian worldviews, how one comes at. And to argue on one level with a person without realizing that they're talking on another level is you're doomed to go past each other like ships in the night. So understanding this representational thing, understanding at what level people are are making these distinctions. But I digress. I do digress. That's not where I was going. I started lecturing at you. So I want to talk about what happened to me on my journey. I gave this job talk that you saw me give data on, and John Falk, one of the prisoners chained up listening to my job talk out here, said, "Nice stuff, Pete. But you know, you put a water bottle in with rats on that schedule, a couple hours, they drink half again their body weight of water." I looked at him like he was crazy. What are you talking about? A, they weren't rats, they were pigeons. I don't like rats, although I've come to like them. B, what is this about me? That'd be like me drinking 90 pounds, no, 70 pounds, 80, I won't tell you. 80 pounds of water. 80 pounds of water in 2 hours? You're crazy. So now come to my lab, you'll see it. That was the first intimation I had after my nice prissy-pissy upbringing that there were strange things not accounted for in my world. It was the first of a number of bombshells in the 60s and 70s. One was schedule-induced polydipsia that occurred in tremendous excess with no good reasons in terms of reinforcement, also called adjunctive behavior. Others is Garcia's bait shyness, delay of reinforcement gradients that last for hours. Another is Jenkins' auto-shaping and sign tracking. Pavlovian contingencies that don't care what the other animal does, strongly out-muscle Skinnerian contingencies that put all their money on what the animal does. Shock is a positive reinforcer. These were radically revolutionary findings. It was an exciting, it was the 60s and 70s. It was an exciting time to be alive. And so I had my fixed stars that I thought were all lined up, and I peek out and I see, no, there are other universes out there. And it became my obsession to try to go beyond what I knew as the superficial, to deeper questions embedded in the larger cosmology. And I warn you, this is not easy to get funded. But with students like Diana Posadas and others, I've continued the quest to study these anomalies. It started with Joel Meyerson, who happened to have some floor panels that he wasn't using, and I could measure general activities in pigeons, and found that it was very orderly in periodic intervals between feedings, normalized on this axis to go from 0 to 1. If you fed them infrequently, they weren't very active, and the more frequently you fed them without having them do anything, the more active they got. And two things are noticeable. One is extremely orderly increase with rate of feeding, which I used as a theoretical muscle, a number of later things, and the orderly pattern. And to that orderly pattern, I fit gamma, series latency mechanisms called gamma distributions that those guys in the back understand. And I tried to intuit or explain what the component exponential processes were that made them up. And went on to demonstrate that the same processes occurred with drugs. I used drugs because drugs were freely available, as Jay said back in the 60s. On my pigeons, rats. And I can infer what's going on with the parameters. And I noticed that chickens were always scratching. I said, well, will chickens do the same thing as schedule-induced scratching that you see up there with periodic feeding fit by the same function, and afterwards used in our yard for egg production, along with the tomatoes and other stuff that we were growing. And schedule-induced aggression, put two animals in a box with periodic food, and one will start tearing the heck out of the other. These are powerful, amazing phenomena. You're tapping into deep ecological things that I really didn't understand. But I felt, well, maybe I've got a finger on them because I've got some models that seem to talk about them, and I can publish them in places.